Here to introduce the next speaker is the Curator of Ethnology, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, Dr. Eric Singleton.
Thank you. I like you guys. This is the best applause I've had in a long time. Yeah, thanks. Well, thank you for being here. We have an exciting afternoon ahead with an art demonstration on the SEC stage. Joining us to help moderate the demonstration is avid art collector and publisher emeritus of Western Art and Architecture magazine. Please welcome Tim Newton.
Thank you, Eric. So our seminar this afternoon is entitled The Evolving Character Head, Bringing Clay to Life. John Coleman, an artist with mastery in three mediums, sculpture, oil painting, and drawing. John's storytelling is deeply rooted in American mythology and traditions, often focused on Native American imagery and the history of the American West. He began his career as an artist in his early 40s after a successful real estate career. In 2009, his sculpture titled 1876 Gall Sitting Bull Crazy Horse won both the James Earl Fraser and the Buyer's Choice Award here at Prix West. Since then, he has gone on to win the Buyer's Choice Award 3 more times, including last year, his Bronze Warrior Spirit Crazy Horse. Please welcome artist and my good friend, John Coleman. I think we're going to have a real comfortable time of this afternoon, enjoying John. You know, when I think about John, I think about the word authentic. You are authentic to us, John. Thank you for that.
Well, it doesn't get any more authentic than just being here putting a bunch of clay on a little wire, does it? You know, so we'll see how that all goes. It's also a little bit like a cooking program because there's a lot of parts to this thing. But what I'm going to do is start off with something that how I normally would start, doing a little bust. This is going to be say a 6-7-year-old Hopi girl, or Navajo girl rather. And I usually start off like this with a pipe, a piece of wire, and then tin foil. The thing that I like to show people is how the basic shape of something becomes an important way to get a three-dimensional sketch that'll help bring on some other ideas. So that's generally how I start my pieces. Years ago, when I was just getting started, I discovered that my wife, Sue, had a really innate ability to critique my work in a way to where if I got a compliment from her, it meant I really had a home run, but she was very reserved on that. So I thought, okay, I'm pretty safe when she likes something. So one day I was in my studio working, and she passed by and commented, "I really like what you got going there. It's you know, pretty nice." And so as she walked by, I thought, well, this is going to be a home run for sure. And then when she came back the other way, she said, "I don't know what happened, but you lost it." So we both kind of talked about that a little bit, and we decided that the best thing to do is to understand that sometimes something you're doing kind of in a very cavalier approach can be a valuable way to just get started on something. And we decided that it would be best if when I'm doing something along those lines, that I maybe get where I'm kind of liking what's going on, and I'll put it away and start over again on something else. The same idea, but more details. And then it's fun to compare the two together, the ones with the details and then the one that are the sketch. And And then there's an opportunity there then to bring out the best of both of them. And I got in the habit, along with charcoal drawing and such, to think of my work as sketches first. In other words, I'm just getting the general idea, general shapes. Get the measurements approximately right. Without spending too much time on one detail. The workshops I've taught, I've noticed that most people find gratification in sticking with what they're good at, and it may be they're good at making ears, so they'll spend the whole time building ears. It's important to prove that that type of thing, there's time to do it, but you can do it later. She's going to be Hopi, or I've got a Hopi girl coming after her, but she's going to be Navajo, so I'm already going to start to put her hairdo on the back here. They got this traditional way they bow their hair in the back. I'm using a type of clay that is a lot like wax. Matter of fact, it is wax and oil, and it's heat sensitive, so that as it cools down, it gets stronger. So it doesn't allow me to do everything at once. So what I do is I have to work on its time.
I'm sure this afternoon that we're going to let John do most all the talking because we want to hear him, but this is going to be pretty casual. So those of you in the audience that have questions, we have a microphone on each aisle, and we encourage you to ask your questions. And please, if you can, step up to the mic. If you can't, then I'll repeat your question if I hear it well. But John is welcoming questions.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I'm spinning it, but if there's an angle that I'm missing and you want to see it, just yell it out and I'll turn it. And where's, oh yeah, the camera's there. Yeah, see, so there we go. Yeah, we're already starting to get a little bit of her face in there. Part of the reason I'm jumping to her neck and part of her torso is so that clay can start to be cooling off and become a little more supportive. Now I got to put my glasses on.
So John, in your busiest times perhaps, how many sculptures would you do in a given year? And did you work on multiple pieces at the same time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Back when I was in the CA, especially in the early times, they encouraged that you could have 7 pieces, and then that was the amount that would allow you to get the CA award. And so I felt, well, that was a good goal. So I always made 7 pieces for the cowboy artist, along with my other work. And in the early days, it was a little easier because I hadn't exhausted all my ideas yet. That's always kind of that's always a little bit of a problem when you start coming back to the well on the same thing. So you have to find a different angle towards it. Mm-hmm. The age of a little girl like this is interesting because the hallmarks have to do with the way the lips are formed. And of course, I'm working in a way where you can't really see what I'm doing. I'm going to step over here for a minute. with those little lips, and then of course the real hallmark is the cheeks. My goal generally when I'm working is to try to find some kind of a gesture before I start getting too many details in. But as I'm working, like right now, I'm starting to just suggest where the eyes are. But if I get too much information in one particular spot, it influences everything else that I'm working on, and I may start to lose track of the symmetry of the piece and some of the other things that will be more important later on. The other thing I'm fighting too right now is and the reason I came up with this evolving head thing it's been quite a while ago. Susan Patterson asked me if I'd do a demo, and I had kind of racked my brain thinking about some of the demos I'd seen before, and I'm like a lot of artists, I'm dyslexic and ADD and all these things. And every time I talk to another artist about that, they go, "Oh yeah, me too. You know, everybody's got it." But I thought, what can I do to keep it going? And I thought, well, what I need to do is I need to change it. And so that's where the evolving thing came from. And of course, now it's worked into 2.5 hours. So I'm really only allowed to spend so much time on one part of this, and then I have to move on. So right now we've been, what are we? 13 minutes into the routine here. All right.
So you're working today from memory.
Yeah, I'm working from memory.
And so a couple days ago, I was speaking with Sherry McGraw, and she and David LaFell can't be here because David was ill, but she wanted me to ask you a couple questions.
Oh, good.
So she wondered about how you choose your subjects, and then do you work from life with that? So if you see an individual, do you work with them in front of you for a while, or how do you begin your process? Yeah,
it's a combination of things that are happening, because sometimes my models just have me walking down the street. I know I turned around. I saw some fellow one time walking down the street, and I hung a U-turn and went down and parked in front of him as he walked up to me, and you know, it was kind of a weird experience, but God, that guy had a great face, you know. Yeah, and I promised myself a long time ago that I wouldn't be embarrassed about doing stuff like that, and so I asked him if he would model for me. And to answer your question, it's kind of a combination. I ended up photographing him, but I did reference him while I was working. So it's kind of a combination. The other thing is that I have a collection of artifacts that I use, and that's a lot of fun too, because I've got everything that's ever been in one of my paintings or my sculptures. I own those things in my studio, so that also becomes a big part of it. And then there's also those things that in life that you see something about a person's anatomy or the structure of their face, and in the storytelling, I can decide whether or not it's going to be subtle or whether I'm going to go ahead and go with a real strong, heroic look.
Yeah.
There's a model that's been modeling for me for over 20 years, and I have to keep changing him a little bit because I don't want all my pieces to look the same. But God, the guy is such a good model, and I've got him down. But he doesn't really need to be in front of me. But especially in sculpture, in painting, that's another story, of course, because now you're dealing with light and shadow, and it's always important to have everything that's there. Okay, so. Yeah, there's a, Richard Schmidt and fellows like that, the idea of the alla prima idea is pretty important. I was heartened when I saw in Richard's book, though, had some pictures of a child, and he said, don't get me wrong, he says, I use photographs for this, because you're trying to get a kid to set for you. So the key is, though, is that every part of how you work, every tool you have can potentially be a crutch and maybe take you away from the creative spot that you're trying to reach. And it's just one of those things. So it's like everything, there is no right or wrong necessarily, but certain things do have a tendency to enhance the energy in a piece, and some things have a tendency to dull them down. And I think that's the first key, is to learn how to do, what is going to what is going to work and what isn't going to work.
You had that great interview with Mark Sublette on his Art Dealer Diaries, and I heard you talk about when you were 15, I think, that you took on a drawing responsibility for a hairdresser fella.
That was
interesting story.
It was a very interesting story. Back in the 60s, there was a hairstylist who was kind of the forerunner of Adele Sassoon and those guys. The movie Hairspray. Was it Hairspray? Yeah. Anyway, he was one of the first celebrity hairstylists.
And you were living in California at the time.
And my older brother worked the Hollywood area. He was he's typical hippie, selling marijuana to everybody. That was pretty much that's what he did. And one of his clients.
He didn't get you into the family business?
Yeah. One of his clients was George Masters, who was this guy who Life magazine had just done an article on him. He was famous for doing Marilyn Monroe's makeup and such, and so he was really a big deal. He was up in his salon. It was in the 9000 building on Hollywood Boulevard, which was a very famous building at the time, and he commented that he said, I think my brother's a better artist. He had this gal in there working for him, and he said, my brother's probably better than she is. And he asked me to come up, and I went to work for him. And basically what he was doing is he had a syndicated column that had to do with the celebrities' hair. It was pretty silly article, but it had to do with celebrities. And he wanted me to work in the salon. I didn't really need to, but he had me work in the salon because I was working from photographs. But it was a great opportunity. I did, meet a lot of people, and for a kid that was, 15, 16 years old, it was a pretty amazing thing. And the downside was, though, is that I got an idea that maybe this is what being an artist was going to be about. It was going to be about hanging out with famous people and such. And it turned out it didn't work out like that. And that was good. It was good that I found out early. And it was shortly after that I met Sue. And my father was an entrepreneurial type. He was always thought of him as a salesman, but he always did very well. And he died, and when he died, Sue and I got married. But the thing that he gave me he gave me the idea that I didn't need to go work for somebody, because he never did. And so her and I we moved to Parker, Arizona. We started an awning business. And awnings meaning those aluminum things that go on mobile homes. And it was 120 degrees out, and the best qualification I had is that I was 19 years old. And I could take it, And it turned out it was a good business, and we ended up getting into other businesses after that. We got into the mini storage business and a few other things that all kind of related to metal. And when I tell that story, I always try to compensate or get that feeling that art was more than a thing to me. It was like a religious experience because I didn't know anything else. It was so important to me that I didn't want to dabble in it. It wasn't a hobby. And basically, from the time I was 19 to the time I was 42, I didn't do any art. But I did learn how to make a living. And when I did start my career, I had an idea of how to get started.
So was art in the back of your mind during?
Well, that was the thing. Yeah, Sue always wondered what happened.
2 decades.
Yeah, Sue always wondered what happened to the art, because she married an artist, and I've always felt that part of my creative nature helped me make a living too. But once I started my career, I felt a little guilty that I hadn't taken the path that some of my friends that were artists had taken, where the starving artist syndrome, and you go through this period where you're desperately trying to create art and make a living at the same time. When I started my career, Sue and I had different businesses already. We had assets. I was able to just step off, and we were financially set. We didn't have to do anything. But I thought, okay, I'm 42 years old. In about 3 years, I'll be halfway to 50. And if I don't start my career today, I'm going to have what some people call the if-only disease. And that was the key. That was the thing that got me off the dime. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I was going to do it. I always thought of myself as a painter. But when I went to the art store, I brought home sculpting supplies, and Sue wondered what the hell was that about. And,
well, yeah. What happened in the art store?
Yeah, well, what happened in the art store was it dawned on me that I can make a sculpture at the same time I can make a painting. Only with a sculpture I can do an addition. So it was a practical thing. It was practical, and in my mind, sculpture and painting were the same thing. I know it's not always like that, and it's not a brag. It just happens to be the way I'm wired. I don't see the difference in the two necessarily, and so. But on the other end of the spectrum too, I felt guilty about not paying my dues as an artist, and so I thought, well, I'm not even going to call myself an artist right away. I'm just going to be doing an art, kind of like an art craft product, and I started doing wall sculptures, and they were resin. Something about the resin made it feel like it wasn't legit, but it looked cool, and damn, the thing sold really well. And I had a few people start to compliment me as an artist, not because I had a gimmick. And I started to realize that, okay, I can go mainstream now. I can go ahead and I can hook up with the foundries. And basically that's what I did, is I went to a place called Johnson Atelier in New Jersey, who taught foundry.
That's a long way from Prescott.
Yeah, but I was really wanting to learn everything there was to learn about foundry, so I could be legit. And that really got me into it. I did my first bronze sculpture. We put an ad in Southwest Art Magazine. At the time, we were living in a house that had three stories. It was a Victorian home, and there had been times when Sue would answer the phone downstairs, and I could tell, and she was real excited. She wanted to come up and tell me about it, and I could hear her running up the stairs, whether it was good news or bad news. And it was real late at night. We had gotten a call. Somebody saw that ad and bought a $20,000 sculpture. That was my first sculpture.
Wow. Whoa.
And I thought, now I'm made. Everything's going to be fine after this. And of course, in real life, it doesn't work like that. It was a lot of work. But okay, I'm into this for. I started it. I'm dyslexic and stuff. It takes me a little while to figure out where I'm at. How long I've been?
Yeah, you have about 20 minutes left on this.
Oh, yeah. 20 minutes to make it 40 minutes?
That'd make it 45.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah. So,
But then I'm dyslexic too, so I don't know if they're... So, talk to us about art and replication.
art and what did you say?
Replication. Just replicating something versus new.
Yeah. Terry was talking about that. Every artist eventually talks about that. Sculpture, especially when I started teaching workshops, it occurred to me that everybody in the class, no matter what their skill level was, I had a coffee cup, and I said, everybody here can do a coffee cup, and you can replicate the coffee cup. Whatever your skill level is, it just may take some people longer than others. And then we had a model setting there, and I said, so what's the difference between the model and the coffee cup? The model is more complicated, but if your goal is just to replicate it, what have you done? You've created something that you're actually seeing that exists in the real world. How about learning how to express how you felt about what you saw? And that's what art really is. It's how you feel about what you see. And so you're using, like in sculpture, like right now, I'm doing little obvious little things to make her look a certain age. Chubby cheeks and the little lips and all that kind of stuff. But until I can start, turning it into something, like give her a little attitude, she's kind of looking around the corner or something, or change the way her head is going to go, or her eyes. The key is to get as much attitude in a piece with as little information, and then as you add more information, then it gets more and more exciting. There's more things that happen, and then you get to a spot where you go too much, and then you got to dial it back. Everybody asks, "How do you know when you're done?" I know when it's done when it starts to fall apart. And of course, but I take it that far. I take it to that spot, and then I can turn it around again. And of course, in sculpture, we're dealing with shadows. That's the reason I brought my own light here, is just to get a downlight on this thing. But
It's a pretty quiet group of people out here. The question is, how long does the clay stay pliable?
yeah, it's actually it's really more akin to wax than clay. So if you think in terms of how wax works, as this thing starts to set or cool down, I can start softening, or I can start smoothing it out. I can start adding more details. And the reason I'm using wax-based clay, it's called plastiline, is because in bronze sculpture, bronze doesn't care what kind of clay you use. I like to say you can use cheese and it'll work the same, because it doesn't matter. Except for this, I can put up in my studio on a shelf, and I can come back and work on it a couple of years later, and it'll always be there. Yeah, that's a good question, I guess. You know, it's sort of a preference kind of a thing. Where's the camera at? Okay. That's 90% of the time, this guy right here. A loop. Like this is another basic tool, you know. But every sculpture anybody's ever seen that I've done, I could have done with my hands and an ice cream stick. I mean, it really doesn't, it's really not that important. It's not like paintbrushes necessarily. But I do work with paintbrushes too. Yeah, the interesting thing is that a child's head is really close to the size of an adult head. The jaw is way different. When the next step, when I take her into a girl that's maybe 16, 17 years old, I'm just changing the length of the nose and the jaw area. How much time have I been on this, Tim?
You got 12 minutes.
Okay, all right. So what I'm going to do is...
So you do a lot of painting now, drawings, and I think that's the path of many artists that have been primarily sculptors. How do you feel about the difference between doing painting versus doing sculpture? What are the differences?
Yeah, the paintings, first of all, make live models more necessary because you're dealing with shadows and the complexity of creating the illusion of three dimension. That's the first thing. But it's, you know, the things they have in common are like in charcoal drawing, edges, lost and found lines, value shifts. I'm doing a charcoal drawing right now. The only difference is I'm using light to define where everything is fitting. I can start to put that bow on back here, even though it wasn't ready before, but that clay is setting up now. Now it'll support it. So when I'm in my studio and I'm kind of just riffing like this, I've got a lot of different ideas and a lot of different thoughts, and I can put these things down. And then when I'm done, I can just mush them up and and forget about it. Or if I find something that's really, really interesting to me and I want to keep it, I can put it up on a shelf. And then I can come back and adjust it. There's a piece I have in the show right now. It's called A Mother's Journey. And it's a Sacagawea is who it is. I had an aversion to calling her Sacagawea because there's more Sacagawea sculptures in the world than any other. And I thought, well, people will get it. I'll call it A Mother's Journey, and they'll get it. But the point on that is that I had done that piece a few years back. I mean, a sketch of that, and I was in my studio, and I was showing a friend of mine, another artist friend of mine, what was going on. And he looked up on it and he goes, "Wow, I really like that piece." And I said, "Yeah, you know, yeah, I kind of like it too." And I said, "Well, hell, I'm going to bring that off the shelf and finish it." And that's what I did. So it's a little different. It's got a little more. It's a little more sketchy than most of my work, but I thought it'd be fun to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to use the word loose either. That's a word that, you know, but it describes kind of the same thing. Yeah. This kind of clay sticks to tin foil really nice, and it's pliable. I can still mush this head in right now. If I used foam, it would be locked. So when I'm doing like a large sculpture, when I first started doing really big pieces, I would use my crock pot. Make sure that clay is still where it needs to be, because I'm gonna use that. Yeah, it's still good. I would use tin foil and beer cans, and you just dip them in, and you just put them on a metal frame, and then you take a stick, you know, like a 2x4 or something, and smack it around, and you can, you know, and shape it. If that makes sense, what I just said. You know, you have an armature that, you know, back in the day, you know, they used to, you can have things scanned now and then have them milled in foam on a 3D milling machine. And that's not a bad way to point a piece up. Back in the day, though, everything was done by hand. And the key is to have an armature that will hold, but is flexible. See, I want her head to be strong enough her neck to be strong enough to hold her head, but I still want to be able to do that. You know, so you're always kind of trying to find that middle ground. And tinfoil seems to work pretty good.
The majority of your subjects are Native American, right, John?
Yeah, okay, so that's one of the things that's really been good for my art career is that I remember I had a friend who was a pretty well-known writer. I really trusted his opinion, you know, and I was getting started. And he says, "What are you doing Native American for?" He says, "You grew up in Manhattan Beach. Why don't you do surfers or something?" And I said, "Well, I don't really do Indians." And he says, "Well, wait a minute." He said, "They look like Indians, you know." And I said, well, okay, I get what you're saying. But what I'm doing is metaphors. I said, these people are outside of my culture. And that makes them, this is American mythology. I know nothing about being an Indian, but I can use those stories to tell other stories. Like if I do a child, it's a child. And she can be cute or not cute, and it doesn't really matter what kind of a, you know, what tribe she is or what she's about. But the adornment of what is happening here creates certain opportunities for abstract shapes, like anything would. And that's given me a foothold where if you're going to make it as an artist, it's helpful if people can kind of peg, you know, where you're at. You know, I've always been the guy that does the Native American stuff. But for a long time, I'd correct people and say, this is American mythology. It's not, I don't think of these as Indians.
But you've done some cowboys, Western scenes.
Yeah, once in a while, I do, yeah. And see, the thing is, it's also to do what you know. When I joined the Cowboy Arts of America, half the guys were kind of like me. They came from places, like even Howard Turpin came from the East. But there's a few of those guys that were actually really cowboys, and they worked the ranches or owned ranches, and they understood the experience of the contemporary cowboy. And I felt like anything I do that I do that I'm not living the life of, like a Native American, is really, I'm talking about my ancestors and using metaphors. It's kind of like this, but it's not, I'm not saying that I understand everything there is about it. I just know that these people in their history has affected my people in history. And there's a lot of things that we have in common. The story, I'm mostly Irish. The Irish people were tribal. And it always occurred to me that all people have the same kinds of things that go on.
You might remember I have your piece, Someone to Ride the River With.
Oh, yeah.
The classic.
Yeah.
Well, cowboy type.
Yeah, see, and Louis L'Amour, I think, might have coined that phrase, but a lot of people don't, they think of it, from what I understand, the river is a metaphor for the herd, and you're riding the herd. And I thought, God, that's such a good name.
Yeah, that conjures up a great scene.
Yeah. All right.
You make it look easy, John.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pull the plug on her so I can get to the next step here in a second. But anyway, so she's gonna have she's got nice little ears. Might. Some little shell earrings, maybe. See, that's the other thing too. Is when you get into the art part, the sculpture and the anatomy of what I'm doing right now is all wrong, but it's right enough to where you can tell what it is. And so, coming up to the idea of what I want it to be, I can start putting in their shapes, abstract shapes. She traditionally has a little shirt on that's got a nice little collar that comes down. Kind of start to suggest that collar. And then her hair's pulled back, but I don't know, maybe she's got bangs. I'm sorry? Oh, all the time. Yeah, all the time. But there is a simplification of things, though. One of the sculpture classes I was teaching, I started thinking about painting and how there's 3 colors. And I thought, well, in sculpture, there's only 2 shapes. I mean, there's more than 2 shapes, but there's circles and squares. Everything is, and then you go, well, how can that be? Well, it can be that way because a circle represents an egg. It also represents the earth. It represents everything that's feminine. And I can stay within my wheelhouse by understanding that composition, back to the last lecture we were listening to, we're talking about design. Design is everything. There's nothing after design. Everything else is nailed to a design. So in sculpture, you do have values, but you also have shapes. And when I say squares, I'm talking about pyramids, talking about lightning bolts, everything that's angular. Boxes, things that are not as lyrical, but they represent stability. The feminine side are clouds, lyrical, sweeping ideas. I definitely want my sculpture to be reduced where I could take everything off of it and still have it convey a feeling. Now that's really extreme editing, and I don't know if that wouldn't be easy to do, but it kind of needs to be at that spot. So everything else now at this point is just music, and now I'm adding some stuff that you can call it the lyrics, okay? You know she's Navajo, not necessarily because she has a Navajo face, and again, given enough time, maybe she's got a Navajo face, but mostly a Navajo face because she's got a traditional hairdo. Okay, does that make sense? I like that little thing on the lip there. Some people call that the milk tooth. That's kind of cool. Okay, and then she might have a little pendant. There's all kinds of information that goes in like a little piece of jewelry. But from a sketching point of view, the design point of view, in my studio, I might be looking at something like that, and I might wonder, is that going to help her in a design point of view? I got all the time in the world to make her look killer cute. I can do that. But is it worth the time for the rest of this story? Okay, and see, and then again, it goes back to also the attitude. Raise her head up a little bit. And maybe the wind is kicking up one of her bangs a little bit. Give her.
It's amazing what the tilt of the head can do in the communication.
That's the key right there, you see. Yeah, just that little thing, And where's the wind coming from? She's got this little thing coming down. And because the wind's blowing this way, it kicks that back. And then maybe it kicks this back too.
Yeah.
You see? And so there's a little bit of a life that starts to happen in that.
Fantastic, John.
Yeah, the whole thing is like, but the purpose to show you guys is that I can see whether or not this is an idea that I should pursue or not. And going back to what Sue told me, this here goes up on a shelf somewhere, and I start over again if I like it. Okay, so now I'm going to go next step.
John, is there a scale that you like working your ideas out at? Some people work
Yeah, there is. I never thought about it, but it turns out that 80% life is this right here is probably 50% life, probably. But if I had a tape measure, I'd tell you what it is. But and then my small pieces always seem to come in at about 40%. It's because my life sizes are usually not really life, they're more like 80. Unless they're going outside, then they go life and a quarter. But I landed on a spot that is, it's always a compromise. And the part that's interesting about that is that changing the size, the goal is that if you make a piece bigger, it should be a lot better piece for it. If it's not, you know, Sue's always on me about that kind of stuff too. You know, she's, you know, why do you want to make that bigger? She says, I think it needs to be bigger. It'll be better. I swear it'll be better. So anyway, yeah, tell you.
Where would you be without Sue?
Well, I wouldn't be doing this.
You wouldn't be standing on the stage here.
Yeah, I'd be selling vacuum cleaners maybe. You know, that's what my dad did. Yeah, but yeah, you know, we all need help, and it's neat. I was very lucky. Sue and I have been married over 55 years now.
Yay.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Yeah, so it's great to start to end up being an old man and be lucky that I seem to not only did a few things right, but I've been real fortunate as well. Okay, so the next step for her is I want to make her a little older. What's our time doing? I'm sorry I didn't tell you were in my time.
You're about 6 minutes behind schedule.
Okay, all right.
You're going to have to speed it up, John.
Okay. We were talking about that before. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make her jaw a little bigger.
So tell us about your heroes.
Yeah, that's a good one. If anybody was here earlier, probably got tired of hearing what a hero George Carlson is to everybody. But yeah, he was the guy right away got on my radar. You know, okay, that's the guy. Yeah. He did a sculpture called "Of One Heart."
Yeah. Oh, that's the one.
And learning to sculpt, you know, at first you're just replicating what you see. And he had 2 horses who were supposed to have 8 legs, and I'll be damned if there was only 1 leg showing, you know. And I thought, okay, that's how he made that thing so powerful. Is he designed it in such a way that you could feel the power of that thing because of how he designed that part of it. And so I've always thought that was really, really special. And as I got better in what I was doing, and thank God George is a little older than me, because I felt like, okay, I got time to get there, you know. But I realized I got my own style, and I shouldn't think like that. I should just think about where I'm at. And
who else? They don't have to be living.
Yeah, well, you know, the people that I surprisingly don't get into is like Rodin. I never really got into Rodin. For his time, I would argue that Rodin was important because he was breaking the rules on something like when the painters were as well. And you know, anybody that's traveled to Italy or those places, and I know my first trip, I realized that they're so skilled that their skill sometimes, in my mind, makes things a little bit ordinary. There's only so many Michelangelo copies you can do. And Rodin came out and did something completely different, and I thought, wow, that's really great. But when I go to a museum now and Rodin's there, I don't find it that interesting. But I give him credit. It's like Jackson Pollock. I get it why he's important. You know, and I kind of like what he did, but I know also that if it's like a lot of things that enter into the world, if they didn't make a sound, you would never know about it. And I think, you know, he was famous for this connection to Peggy Guggenheim in New York and Time magazine, and he became important, and that importance changed the way people see art. And I think that was pretty cool. Andrew Wyeth, of course, was Andrew Wyeth's prints were in my bedroom when I was a child growing up.
Wow.
You know, Christina's World was to me was like, still gives me goosebumps when I see it. You know, so there's just things about those kinds of things that have always been really important. Sculpture heroes, you know, are not quite the same in my mind. I don't know.
Jonathan Kenworthy?
Hmm?
Jonathan Kenworthy?
Well, yeah. No, that's a good one. Yeah. Painting and sculpture, I feel, are so closely related that I feel safe in having more painting heroes than I do sculpting heroes. When I first started, I was in Laguna Beach, and when I first started my next career. My first one was when I was in high school, but when I really got back to it, I was in Laguna Beach, and Richard McDonald had a piece. It was called Orpheus Descending, and it was an acrylic sculpture, and I found it really fascinating. And so I thought, okay, this guy's kind of interesting. I want to check on him. And I ended up taking a workshop from him.
Yeah.
And he's not only a character, but he's also he's quite good. And so I learned a lot from him. But again, you can only go so far with somebody, and he had a certain limit that he would work with, and it wasn't really, in my mind, wasn't really evolving, but he's pretty good. I like what George did, though. Of course, is George had done those beautiful pastels of the Tarahumara.
Yeah.
And then you just, all you saw was his sculptures after that. And then when he got back into the painting, that was a great way of bringing something new. And it was really, really very impressive. And yeah, so I hope I've got enough time in my life yet to do something special like that. That goes beyond what my normal thing is. We all have our little shtick that we do, I'm afraid, and we all are driven by what our friends and our collectors love. And I was actually talking with Scott Burdick this morning. We were talking about that. And Scott is another one of those guys that I just really admire because he doesn't kind of does his own thing and in a very humble way, But he's not. His work doesn't sell. He just figures that the right person just hasn't been there yet, and sure enough, it always works out.
For sure, it does.
Yeah. And I thought, well, that's a great attitude. See, I was cursed and blessed by having a father who was a great salesman and a great entrepreneur, and I always equated doing good business with success. But the problem is, and this is an important thing, is that people that collect your work collect it for a lot of different reasons, and they have a bias, of course. And I talk about my favorite collector, who's become like my dad. His name is Howie Alper, and some of you guys have probably heard his story, but this is 30 years ago, almost exactly 30 years ago. He called from Chicago and basically said, I have a friend of a friend who said I should collect your work. Can you FedEx me some photographs? And we did, and then shortly after I got a phone call. He goes, I'm going to be in your area. Can I come by your studio? And my studio was kind of a hellhole in a steel building downtown, and so I invited him to my house. And he came in and he saw what I was just getting started, so I had 2 bronzes or maybe only 1 bronze, yeah, and a couple of wall reliefs. The bottom line was that he was very nice and everything was wonderful, and he liked what he saw. He'd had a scare and had to go to Mayo Clinic. prostate cancer, who wanted a gift for the doc that he felt saved his life. And so he not only bought one of my wall reliefs for himself, but he bought one for a gift for his doc. And then he bought my bronze that I did, and then he's on the way out the door, and I'm thinking to myself, life doesn't get any better than this. You know, this is the best thing that ever happened. The guy just comes from out of town, and he's taking all my stuff for me. And then he's on the front porch, and he says, I got an idea. And I go, what's that, Howie? And he said, how about if you make number one for me from now on? I go, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, he said, if you'll save number one for me, I'll buy it.
Sight unseen.
Yeah. Well,
Not knowing what would be coming.
Not knowing what would be coming, and that was 30 years ago, and he owns number one of everything I've ever done.
Incredible. Wow.
You know, isn't that a great story?
Oh, yeah.
Now, obviously, there's the catch is that the small catch is that if I do different sizes, he'll pick the size he wants, and sometimes he owns both. Yeah, but you know, I mean, and that was the thing I kept telling Howie. I said, you know, you don't realize it's great to know that you got one piece sold, but it's even better to have a story like that. I mean, how many people have a story like that?
Not many, no.
Talk about, you know.
Remarkable.
Yeah, it was. It's amazing. And he just, you know. And so who else does he collect? Nobody. He doesn't collect anybody else. He just collects me. He has other works of art now, but the other part that's kind of interesting about him in his story is that he's got a really beautiful place in Mexico. And he decided that he wanted to start trading stays in his place in Mexico for art. And he used to come to the shows with me, so he inadvertently became better known than I was. The magazines were even writing about it. And so he started trading spaces in his he called it the Palace in Mexico. And he's just a run. Him and his wife, Frankie, they're just beautiful people. And you just can't find people. It just happens, you know. So he even took one of my workshops, which was really funny too, you know, because he says, well, what can I contribute? And I said, one thing, these guys need to see what a real collector looks like. And so he gave his own little seminar, you know, during the class. And we were working with nude models, and you know, he was a little shy about that. And it was funny though, because he loved playing tennis, and so his first piece was a tennis player, and he had the male model, and then finally he had to get the girl over to his side, and so he decided just to do her head, and he created this. I showed him how to put a hat on her, and he titled it "Sophisticated Lady," and he said, "So well, now what do I do?" And I said, "Well, you cast it, and so how many do you want to do of it?" And he had 10 children, you know, in his family that he wanted to give the sculptures to, and I said, so how are you going to number them? And I said, as long as I get number one. And he said, okay. And so I took number one, and then the rest of them were all number twos. So he's very diplomatic about that. Yeah, but yeah, you know, it's just a lot of fun. You know, what a fun guy.
What a great relationship.
Yeah.
I mean,
He
really,
just had his 95th birthday, and he's just still very active, still doing a lot of stuff.
Have you sculpted him?
I have. Yeah, I did his portrait for his 90th birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not really something that's in my wheelhouse that I enjoy doing generally, but for him, it turned out really good. I think.
Wonderful.
And he was really happy with it. Mm-hmm. So all's well that ends well. It was great.
So tell us what you've got going on there.
Okay. All right. Okay. What's happening here is that she's starting to get to be more of a 18-year-old, and she's going to go Hopi, and I'm going to put her squash blossoms on. And how am I doing on time?
You're doing fine.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
But what I'm doing is I'm widening out her face, widening out her eyes, bringing up her cheekbones.
For the microwave there, you've got that has maintained the temperature adequately to keep it soft enough?
It gets hotter in the back than the front, and I move it around.
Okay.
And then my crock pot here, it needs to be liquid, but not so liquid that it burns me when I touch it. And that comes in on the last piece. It's a hassle. You know, this stuff is what I have in my studio. And I thought, it's too much a hassle to bring all this stuff. But then I thought, no, this is how I work. I'll just bring it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing that's important too, you know, I notice when I'm teaching, if the back of the head isn't going to be shown, people have a tendency to ignore it. But it's always good to keep those proportions, you know, fairly close. And I'm glad Tim's here to wake me up once in a while and ask what I'm doing.
So I've listened to you talk many times about, you know, the subjects and the Native Americans and whatnot. And it always seems to me that you're quite the historian.
Yeah, that's very important to me because just natural to me is we're all fearful of what's going to happen next, and it's also exciting. But if you don't have a natural interest in history, that's what tells you what's going to happen next. Mm. And I've always, as a child, that my learning disability thing was really in the way. I mean, it's not that I'm saying something that's totally unique. A lot of people have this problem. But when I was in the 7th grade, I was given an IQ test because they thought I needed to go into special needs class, and because I couldn't read or write, and I still have trouble with that. But history has always been something I've been interested in, and I found that I'm actually good at listening to people talk. And any classes that I had taken in school that had to do with history, I did very well in, because I didn't have to read. I could just remember what they said. Yeah. I had an interesting thing happen to me when I was a junior in school. The counselor brought me in and told me to go home. And I said, well, I'm starting to actually enjoy school now. What can I do to stay in school? And he said, you're never going to graduate, but you can ask one of your teachers if you'd like, if you can just stay with them. And I went to my art teacher, and my art teacher says, yeah, you can just hang out with me. So for a year and a half, I took a history class, art class, and PE. Wow. Never graduated, but my art teacher and I became great buddies. Sue and I were in the same history class. And I got a great grade, and I don't think she did so well. And yet she did my homework. That was the funny thing. And she always thought that was funny. I'm like, how did that happen? You know, like you weren't paying attention to those great lectures. There it is. Oh.
So another piece of your art that we're fortunate to own, very fortunate, is the healer.
Yeah.
You know, just the bust. And, you know, so I don't collect much in Native American realm, but that completely transcends all humanity.
Yeah.
I look at that.
Yeah, thank you.
And I get emotional.
Yeah, that was the key. Is we're all tribal on some level, and he technically does fall into the category of the Native American, but it could be anything really.
Absolutely, just the oh.
That was another one of those that was interesting because Sue was in California visiting her family, and I was sending her pictures back and forth, and she kept telling me, no, not yet. You don't know, you need a little of this and need a little of that.
I love this stuff.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, nah, you didn't get it yet. Nah. But Sue, look at this. Isn't that great? No, it's not so good. People always ask me, is she artistic? And I go, I think she's better than I am. She just doesn't want to hurt my feelings, because so she. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think a lot of artists have to learn from is that taking criticism is an important thing to get you on a path that wakes your brain up. There's a lot of things that someone will see and they say, well, what do I know? I don't know anything about art. I said, have you ever gone into a gallery and something struck you as being like a sour note, something was off? I said, that's the kind of stuff I want you to look at. Yeah. Do I have something that's off a little bit or doesn't feel right? Because, and I always talk about this, and some people understand right away what I'm talking about, but everybody knows a little bit about what nose blind is, where an off smell will dissipate when you don't get away from it right away. And if you're stuck in a hot outhouse or something, it's pretty gross. But then within a few minutes, your brain says, never mind, it's okay. When I'm looking at something, I've only got a few moments to really be a good judge of it. And that's why, you probably notice that artists work with a mirror. And I'll look back in my mirror and I'll look at that, and then I'll photograph it, I'll turn it upside down. And what that does is it reconnects my brain. But a good critique will do that too. I bring a painting down to the house. That's the other thing I do too, is I have Sue, I don't have her come up to the studio. I bring everything down to the house, and we have a special wall that I hang stuff. And then she will look at it. But there's something about the walk down which helps. And then she'll start to look, and one of her favorite things is always to look at, she starts looking at her hands. And I know that there's something wrong with the hands. But it doesn't matter. I don't need to know exactly. I just know there's something wrong.
But you always walk it down to the house.
Yeah, I bring the work down to the house. We put it up on the same wall.
Special delivery.
Special delivery, yeah.
You have an amazing place there. You should tell a little bit about it.
Yeah, Prescott. It's in an older neighborhood in Prescott, but it's unique in that there's a lot of boulders, and it's there's a lot of boulders and pine trees. It's a couple acres, which again is kind of unusual because it's a residential area. Sue found it on the internet, I guess. There was a photograph of the view from the living room, which is all glass, and we had a really fun house that we really loved downtown. It was an 1898 Victorian house, and I didn't really think we were moving or anything. But she said, this would be good for your studio, and so we went and looked at it and we bought it. And I bought it. I in my mind. In my mind, that was going to be my studio, and it was my studio for a while. And it turned out, it's big. It's about 5,000 square feet, and it's had a big kitchen in it. And we were able to host museum tours and stuff. The Prix to West, I've been there too. And so it really worked out good for the whole package of the kind of work I'm doing. And then we started thinking, well, you know what? This house is actually built fairly well. We hired a designer to come in and look at it and said, yeah, it's built really good. Why don't we spend some money on it and remodel the thing? So that's what we did. We remodeled it, and it's really turned out it was a good idea. And at that point, I met a man and his sons who were really great craftsmen who had done a lot of work for me, and I had them build my studio. And so
Perfect.
I got exactly the studio I wanted. And we live in, it's like paradise. It's really nice.
I was there for one of Seth Hopkins' famous,
Oh,
well, maybe it was the famous dinner where, but you'd bid he was cooking for 8, and
yeah, that was a
and
great.
you won that
Yeah.
bid, and then
Yeah.
you upped
Yeah.
and then you upped it again and said, well,
Yeah, yeah.
we do 12. Well, how about 16?
What we end up with 50 people?
20? Yeah, there was like 50 some people
Yeah.
into your living room space. It was spectacular.
Yeah, and-
Where's Seth?
Yes. Seth had a chef outfit on. Seth is here somewhere, isn't he?
Yeah, he was. Maybe he got bored. I don't know.
Yeah, he got bored and left. Yeah. He didn't know we were going to talk about him. Yeah,
Oh gosh.
yeah, but that's fun. That's fun stuff.
Yeah. Another question Sherry McGraw had was about your patinas.
Yeah.
I know that's very, very important to you, and you have
Yeah.
Eric Peterson that does
Yeah,
your patination.
yeah. That's the whole thing. Is if you're a painter, you can imagine what it might be like if you turn your painting over to somebody who's like putting a frame on it, and then they have to put a glaze over it, or they have to put some color on it. It's such a vital part of the process. I learned how to do the patination myself, and I didn't have any intention really of turning it over to anybody else. But Sue and I started traveling around looking for a good patineur because it was taking me too long. And I had to rationalize that the compromise would be is that I'd get somebody else to do the patinas, but I would be able to get more sculpture done. And I couldn't find anybody. And one day, Eric Peterson and his buddies show up in my studio. I'd met him in a drawing, life drawing class. And he said, I'm starting a new business. I'm working for the foundry down the street, and I'm going to start my own business. And I said, great. I had gotten to be a good patineur myself, and I showed him what I had. I had a new piece that was all finished. I put it right next to another one, and I said, copy it. And it was an interesting thing. Psychologically, it was hard for me to deal with it because on one level I was thrilled. I found the guy that could do it, and the other, he was better than me. And that's the old business adage. If you want to be successful, find people smarter than you. There's a lot of different levels of smarter, and he was definitely, when it came to that, he was smart. And that's been over 20 years ago. And he's been making me look good ever since. I mean, he's the best. He's the
That's
best.
a wonderful,
I've never
wonderful
seen
relationship.
anybody that's as good as he is.
Man.
And the other thing is he cares. He actually finds stuff that I was ready to let go, and he goes, no, this isn't right. And he's just one of those people. Yeah, I'm teaching a workshop up in Colorado Springs at the Broadmoor, and he's going to go along and do some patina, show people about the patina stuff. But the patination thing is so hard because it's a process of putting. It's a process of. Yeah, I'm okay. At 3:30 is when I'm done, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was learning how to do my patina, I did take some workshops at a place that taught foundry work, and I got the basics on that. And I almost and if you don't like what you do, if you don't like the piece when you're done putting the patina on, you don't erase it. You got to sandblast it. You got to take it all the way down. And I was afraid I was going to destroy my pieces because I was sandblasting them so much. And then Sue had one standard comment that it looks purple. Every time I did, I go, it looks pretty good, right? He goes, no, it's too purple. So how do you fix that? You sandblast it and start over again. And so it was, because it's not only a combination of the chemicals that you're using, it's also the heat and how the bronze is prepped underneath, whether it's got a gloss polish or a sand polish. And it'll affect the colors and how everything changes. And so it's literally it's talk about a combination of crazy things. And Eric has got this thing where he can do that, and it's almost a miracle to me because I worked so hard to get a look, and the fact that he could copy it when nobody else could, it's just incredible. But the bottom line on that is, if anybody's trying to figure out how to do this stuff, I hate to admit it, but there's a lot of luck involved. But you also have to have standards that are at a certain level, but not so high as that you're completely immobilized by it as well.
Okay, we can't hear you at all.
I noticed when you were adding on the clay to make her older, you never changed her eyes because eyes don't change with age. Only the skin around it.
Okay, so you have to say that again for me now.
I noticed that when you were adding on the clay to make her older,
Yeah.
or 18, that
Yeah.
you never changed the eyes because the eyes
Oh,
never
oh.
changed, just the skin around it.
Yeah. What you haven't seen yet is that I've already widened them, and now I'm going to build them up. But I widened them out. But the key is that the eyes are set, gave me a set place to go from. And what I've done, I haven't added to the top of her head, but I've added to the bottom of her face. And I made her nose longer. So the eyes did get a little bit wider, and now I'm widening out the cheeks. But see, that gave me a benchmark. So now I'm working around, as opposed to where if I just started from scratch, then it would take me a little longer to get where I'm getting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the process that I started with, it gives me an advantage to the other things that I'm changing. See, in the next thing I do, she's going to become an old man. So the next thing that's going to change again, but those eyes are always going to be about in the same spot. Okay?
Did you ever think about being a plastic surgeon?
Yeah.
Sounds like you've got it figured out.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I try that. Yeah.
So two questions. What are some of your favorite pieces of yours?
Yeah. The two that pop up the most is the 1876. That's the three characters from the Custer Battle. And Honeymoon at Crow Fair.
And what?
Honeymoon at Crow Fair. That's the one that's outside. Those are my favorites, I think. Yeah, I mean, I have others' favorites too.
Sure.
But those two. The Honeymoon at Crow Fair, and of course, that's the other thing that's interesting to talk about, because you don't just come up with an idea like that and say, okay, this is what it's going to be. I started to take note of the paintings I was seeing where very masculine warrior types were carrying parasols. And when you study what was happening when the settlers were coming through and their wagons would be raided and such, one of the best prizes that some of these men, warriors, could get would be a parasol, because it was shade.
Sure. Wow.
Portable shade. The other thing is that they didn't feel, their culture was such that anything that belonged to the enemy, they could draw power from. So they were very interested in capturing these things and converting them to their own use, and then they would adorn them in their way. So there'd be feathers and all these other things on it. And so I always thought, that'd be fun to do something like that. And there's this thing that happens at Crow Agency, is Crow Fair, it's called, and it started around 1900, and it was originally designed set up to have a place to celebrate the old way of life, and so everybody would bring their teepees and set their teepees up. And there's a parade that it starts off with, and if you see some of those old photos of the parade, everybody's got their parasols.
Wow.
And I was at trail ride, and a friend of mine who likes to bring artifacts to the trail ride comes up, and he's got a parasol. And I said, I want that parasol. I'll buy that thing. And I brought it home, and I thought, I'm going to do something with that. And then the idea came to me mostly because I knew that people using a couple on a horseback and having the male holding the parasol was going to seem odd. But in their culture, of course, it's not all odd at all. And I thought that would be a nice hook for my piece, though, because she's not holding the parasol, he is. And the nature of the Crow people, especially in the day, is that it was peacocks and peahens. The women were kind of dressed down. The men were very, very flamboyant. And then the other part of that, of course, for the Crow people is that the conquistadors, when they came in, their horses were adorned like the medieval knights. And the Crow people interpreted that, and they would use all the little accoutrements that the knights used on their horses. And they had all this cool stuff. And it's real, but it was the conquistadors that influenced that. So when I'm doing my piece, what's sinking into my head is I've got Lancelot and Genevieve here, and they're King Arthur's court, and they're all, glory and all this kind of stuff, and he's going to be carrying this parasol, and she's going to be snuggling into him, and they're going to be celebrating, I'll call it a honeymoon, and my granddaughter was visiting as I was roughing this thing in, and I got a saddle and a sawhorse, and I had her set on there with her boyfriend. I said, so snuggle into your boyfriend. I want to see what that looks like. And my sketch, see, this was my sketch. It was like this. The head of the girl was tilted in, and when she did it, her head kind of did a little S curve. Kind of hard to describe. My neck's so stiff I can't mimic what she was doing. But when she did that, it was like, oh, it's like the scale went like this. I went, thank you. Okay, that was it.
Yeah.
That's funny. Thank you, no problem. Yeah, but see, those are things that come up, and it's like, what are some of the things that make something a big hit, as opposed to just something that was kind of nice, and that was one of the things that made it really important. The 1876, it kind of had the same kind of a story. Sue and I were up at the battlefield, the Custer Battle, and we had a really nice guide and stuff, and he was talking about the natural ability of the native warriors, and they were trained warriors, where Custer's men were, a lot of them were immigrants and really weren't trained warriors at all. They were encumbered by the weight factor, their 145-pound limit with their rifles, and for some reason, single-shot rifles didn't weigh as much as the Winchesters did, and so the Indians had the repeating rifles, and Custer's guys didn't have the repeating rifles. Strange thing. And so before we went up there, I had been thinking in terms of what was my next sculpture, and I thought I want to do something where the characters are setting. And we were kind of talking about that on the way home, and I thought, what would be kind of fun what if we took the principles of the Custer Battle, and of course that can be debated in history who the most important ones were, but Sitting Bull was the reason they were there. Even though he was considered an elder, actually, he was there, but he didn't fight in the battle, which is also interesting. He was 44 years old. But what if they came in my studio and they had their portrait done right after the battle? What would they look like? And the reason I thought like that is that I had an image in my mind of when I was a kid. I had to go to court. I got in trouble and had to go to court. And I walked in the courtroom, and the judge was up there, and he was flanked by a couple of other people, I don't know, the bailiffs or whoever, and they were staring me down as I walked in. And I thought, that's the look I'm going to have. And these guys need to be staring you down. But see, it wouldn't exist in real life, though, unless they were having their portrait done.
Right.
See, and so that all of a sudden, that made the thing work. The other thing that made it work and it was kind of rough because the war bonnet in that design had to be there. The war bonnet was part of it's the lion's mane. It's the big thing, the thing that psychologically makes it important. You know, it's you can call it a halo, or you can call it a sun disk, but that round thing in the middle. But it had to be real, so Sitting Bull wore a bonnet when he worked with the Buffalo Bill show, but prior to that, there was no photographs of him wearing one. I thought, if he didn't have one before that, I can't do it, because I had to make sure the history was right. And at the Bozeman battle, he had been given a bonnet, and so I knew he owned one. So then I was able to do that. And since the pieces had been out, I've had nobody say that it was wrong. But that piece, literally, I couldn't have done if it wasn't for this round shape.
Oh, yeah.
That made the piece work.
I'm sorry we don't have a slide to show there. It's such an iconic piece.
Yeah. Okay.
Tim,
Yeah.
I heard my name was taken in vain while I was.
I did say something bad about you, Seth. Yeah.
But I want to put a vote in for my favorite piece, and I'm sure everybody in the room is thinking the same thing when you're asking about John's favorite pieces. Mine is Lives with Honor, which has that same sort of shape that John was talking about.
Yeah.
And he and I have talked many times about how it symbolizes somebody who's lived a great life. And that it's universal and transcends Native Americans, which I know John has talked about many times, that it's not necessarily about the Native American people, it's the universal humanitarian humility of people and humanness and the human condition.
Yeah.
So if you haven't already, I wonder if you'd talk about that for a minute. I had to step out for a few minutes.
Yeah. That's the thing. I'm always talking about metaphors, and when I did that piece originally, I had people, tell me they were buying it for their father, who was a great man. He was a war hero and that kind of stuff. And I said, so what if I would have put him in a business suit? Would it have meant as much to you? And of course, see, it goes back to the metaphor. The accoutrements of success from a native's point of view, with all the regalia and such, was very important.
Thanks, Seth. We were talking about your great dinner.
Yeah, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of end up on that same design. I'm going to just reminded me I better get hopping here because I'm. So the Hopis, when the girls get to that age where they've reached puberty and they're not married, the hair goes up in these squash blossoms, they call them. Call them all kinds of different things, but that seems to be the term that's used mostly. I swear that George Lucas borrowed this for Star Wars. It's a Princess Leia look. But see, again, it's neat how to see certain shapes are really, really cool, you know. And you don't have to do much, but just that little thing like that, tells you more about the story. part of the hairdo as well was they have like these little bangs that come down off the sides. Very unique. And then, real common to wear a blanket. I'm gonna take a risk. But if you've ever seen a painting or a photo of those Hopi girls, they usually have some kind of a blanket like this coming up, and it goes up real high on the back of their head. And that in itself starts to give you an idea of something with only just putting it for a few seconds. Now, if I wanted to make it nice, I'd spend a little more time, but that's enough to kind of go, oh, well, you know, yeah, that's not a bad thought. And then the next thing I can do with this idea, okay, all right, okay, thank you. All right, let's take it, let's do another thing with it here while we got her, before I go to the other guy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close her eyes. The reason I'm closing her eyes is because she can be in some kind of supplication or prayer, you see. See that? And let's put a little wind behind her. It's kicking her hair out a little bit. Let's see, maybe maybe she has a hand coming up holding on to it. Again, this is the kind of thing that just you need. A good example of what I'm about to say has to do with smoke in a fire. If you turn it upside down, it's water. In sculpture, it's the same shape. Everything has to do with the context. For the purposes of a sketch, that's enough of a, for me anyway, that's enough to look like a hand because of where it's coming from and it's holding on it, you see. So doing the sketch idea, I mean, I could nail this hand where it's perfect, but then then you become invested in it. And what if you want to change it? Well, I've put all this work into it, now I've got to change it. See, at this point, I have no investment at all, and off it goes. So we're all set. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn her into something else.
This is really great to just watch this transformation from one to the next. Really a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Running out of real estate here. Not too bad, though. Not as bad as it could get. So again, I know the face is going to be a little bit longer.
John, I'm sure that not everybody knows about your Bodmer-Catlin series.
Oh, yeah.
But it'd be interesting, I think, for people to know.
Yeah, that was another one of
Tell us the origin of that. And
one of the first thoughts I had when I started my career when I considered myself a legitimate artist is I wanted to celebrate the people that I thought were the most important, and in Western art, it's Remington and Russell, and for good reason, of course. And everybody will agree with that, is Remington and Russell, and everything seems to come off of that. But I always wondered what happened, 40, 50 years earlier when you had George Catlin and Carl Bodmer. And what those guys were basically was 1832, Catlin started off to create items for a curio museum that he wanted to replicate that he saw in New York City, and he considered himself a painter, but he admittedly wasn't that great of a painter. He knew he wasn't good enough to make a career out of it, like some of the other painters of the time. So he thought, well, I'm going to go west, and I'm going to see if Clark was still alive, of Lewis and Clark, and he was going to check with him and find out where some of these characters were that they had met. And he thought, I can go paint these guys, and they can populate my curio museum with artifacts and paintings. And that was his first impetus for that. Bodmer was a young man working for a fellow named Maximilian, who was a kind of a scientist, and he was kind of paid as a hired hand to be like his photographer. But there wasn't any photography in those days, so he was doing watercolors. Well, as it turns out, with Lewis and what Clark gave them, they were both of them working at the same time, never met each other, but they started creating these works and images of these people that nobody would have ever known otherwise. I mean, there's some things that are written. So one of the most famous ones was Keokuk, but a lot of those guys were virtually unknown. And they not only painted their portraits, but they created a real record of who these men were and what they were about. And Catlin did 700 portraits. And I mean, you know, it's like, well, how come he wasn't mentioned, you know? So I thought, okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do 10 pieces, 5 Catlins and 5 Bodmers, and I'm going to use their paintings. And in my rationalization, how I would look at it is, I'm going to flesh these guys out. But at the same time, even though these drawings are fairly crude, I'm still using their reference to the point where I felt a little uneasy, of course, because these are paintings that were works of art in their own right. What gives me the right to come along and copy them and make sculptures out of them? And I rationalized that it was enough to where, you know, I'm doing them in 3 dimension, and you know, and it was a tribute. You know, I didn't want to be hokey. But it took me 10 years to get around to it, and the reason I waited 10 years is because I needed enough credibility in my career where people would take it serious and know that I'm not just ripping them off. And of course, when the pieces were done, it was so much different than the actual pieces anyway that I never really had a problem. No one ever really felt, you know, my concerns were not warranted really. The Jocelyn Museum in Omaha has all of the Catlin or the Bodmer watercolors, and they were the first ones that bought a set of my pieces. So I thought, well, okay, that was it, you know. But yeah, it's an interesting story because of some of the stuff. As an artist, you want to do something that is meaningful, but you know, at the same time, I'm not really sure if I'm overstepping my bounds. And as it turned out, that still comes back to one of the greatest things I've ever done because it keeps coming around. It keeps coming around. Seth bought a set for the Booth Museum, and I still have people tell me, "Oh my God, we went down this hallway. That's just these guys are just lying in the hallway, and it's such an honor, you know, to be presented like that." But the point is nothing comes lightly. You know, you have to really consider what you're doing, and whether you're actually benefiting, it's going to be a benefit, or you're just you know, hijacking something. And you know, sometimes you're not, you know, you don't really know until afterwards, you know, what the results are going to be of that.
And then move on from there to Greenwood Cemetery.
Yeah, Greenwood Cemetery. Yeah, that was a good one too. We were up in Colorado at the Leaning Tree Museum with the National Sculpture Society, and one of the members of our group, who happened to be our accountant, basically, for the National Sculpture Society, was complimenting me on one of the pieces that I had out in the garden, and it was of Adida Hish, who was painted by Catlin, or by Bodmer. I'm sorry. It wasn't. It was one of the others. But the bottom line was that he said, you know, I have him, and I said, well, that's nice, but you don't have him. Because I know where all these went, and you don't have one of them. I said it a little more nicely than that, but I thought, well, you know. And he goes, no. He says, I'm the president of Greenwood Cemetery, and he says, I have Catlin. He's buried there. And he says, you know the story, don't you? And I said, yeah, you know, I do know the story, and the story basically is that he took his bride to France. And the family was pretty well to do, and they had this plot in Greenwood Cemetery where the family was all being buried. And he took his wife to France, and she died. And they had to go to France and collect her body. And they really were pissed off, you know, at him. And when he died later, they refused to bury him there. So here's the guy who did all this important stuff, and they refused to bury him. So they didn't mark his grave. We all knew where he was buried, but they just didn't mark the grave when they did bury him. And he's in that same plot. And the point is that the president of Greenwood Cemetery suggested, why don't we give him a fitting marker for his grave? Because he had a little stone that was put in 1964 by the Friends of the Westerners, saying George Catlin. Prior to that, there was nothing at all. And I suggested, there was a guy named Black Moccasin who Catlin painted when he was 100 years old, and he asked how Long Hair and Long Knife were doing. That was Lewis and Clark. And he says, I was the second chief of the Hidatsis, and I was the first ones to greet Lewis and Clark when they came up the river. So that was 100 years. He was 100 years old. He painted his portrait. I said, what if we let's go back 30 years when that event happened. Now we've got Black Moccasin at 70, and he's greeting Lewis and Clark, and that's what the greeter is, the one that's in the gallery right now. And of course, I did a larger version. The larger version is on George Catlin's grave. And that's a pretty amazing feeling, too. I mean, you talk about wondering if you're worthy or not. We had a beautiful ceremony. We had some of the descendants of George Catlin was there. Some of the descendants of Black Moccasin were there. We unveiled the piece on Catlin's birthday, which my birthday was just following that. So we had a birthday cake, and that was fun. And the native people there did their songs and stuff, and
that's a very impressive and significant cemetery there in Brooklyn.
Yeah, that's the part too that is interesting. Is that Lewis Tiffany is right across the street from George Catlin. Boss Tweed is right down next door to. Leonard Bernstein is buried there. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's a who's who.
It is the place to go.
Yeah. The original Clinton, that built the Erie Canal. They were the first ones, one of the first politicians to be buried there. And it's an interesting story because he was buried across the river first, and the developers of Greenwood Cemetery paid the family to have him exhumed and brought over there so that they could say that they got Clinton there. So it's a pretty interesting tactic.
I'm trying hard not to say that people were just dying to get in there.
Yeah, I know. It's funny, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
I heard you say that the simpler something is, the easier it is to get to the eloquent part.
Say that again?
Yeah, the simpler that something is, the easier it is to get to the eloquent part.
Yeah, that's always the story.
About eloquence.
Yeah, eloquence. Eloquence is a word that has to do with things that are ethereal. My favorite illustration of that is Lincoln writing a letter to his buddy, and he started off by saying, "I apologize for the length of my letter. I didn't have time to make it brief."
Exactly.
And that's exactly the way it is. Yeah, It's very hard. It takes a long time to make things brief, to edit them down to where they're at their essence. But you see, that's the whole thing about things that exist in the real world, as opposed to the mythological spirit of things. Going back to what artists do, artists talk about the spirit. Leave room for the viewer. That's the key. How you do that is you allow them to have their story. Like Seth was talking about, the character that I did and what that meant to him. I would have ruined the whole thing for Seth if I would have said, no, he's really he's all about a baker, and that's not a word bonnet, that's a chef's hat, and he's really, you see, you have to just get out of your own way and let the piece speak for itself, and whatever someone might feel about it is the key. I first learned that a long time ago. I had someone listening to me as I was talking, and I'm pretty wordy, and I can get into all kinds of ideas about what's going on, even with my own work. And he said, have you ever considered that someone might have a better story than you? Maybe you ought to stand back and let them have their own story. And I thought, damn, that's exactly right. I was guilty of that. And I still talk a little too much sometimes, but my goal is not to please myself. My goal is to create an audience where there's benefit to it. They get a benefit to what I'm doing. And we all have our little tribal ideas about who we are and what we're trying to do. And art to me is not about making stuff. I've always been a natural craftsman, but craftsmanship doesn't imply that you're making poetry. And poetry is the essence, the spiritual idea of how something feels to somebody and how they're going to interpret that for some of their own personal experiences. And when you can tap into their experiences and they get the goosebump thing that starts to happen. That's the key. A goosebump is when you're surprised, but it works. And it's hard to get to that spot. I've always been fascinated how music will do that. You can be in a concert and listen to somebody play, and I've never heard them play before, and maybe they even wrote the music, but when they hit the wrong note, it's the wrong note. How do you know that? Because there's a lineage that passes by, and you're anticipating, and you're looking for a change. You want it to be an exciting change. Oh, I didn't know that could happen. And that's the exciting part, but it's a balance.
So talk about edition sizes.
Yeah. That's in bronze. That's a good topic. Bronzes are not giclées. They're not copies of something else. They're considered original work, even though there might be 20 of them, because each one is cast in its own way, and there's subtle changes. But from a practical point of view, a piece that may cost $10,000, if it was a one of a kind, would cost $100,000. And so, from an artistic point of view, it's impractical. So you do in editions, and that started, quite a while ago. It hasn't always been that way, but it's basically a point where I have like a scale in the back of my head about what something's going to cost, how long it took me to do it, and as the edition goes up, the quality and value of the collectible piece goes down to the point where if it's too high, it becomes a gift store object. It's not fine art anymore, but it's kind of arbitrary.
So when you first started,
Yeah,
did you do greater edition sizes?
I did. My series were 35.
Uh-huh.
and it was great. I got away with it. Everybody, they loved it, and everything happened. But as I got older, and again, thanks to Sue again, Sue said, you know what? With the high edition, what's going to happen is that your pieces are going to end up in auctions. The more they show up, the value is going to go down. And then you're going to compete with yourself. People forget about that part, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, why, you know, just...
Yeah.
And I still compete with myself a little bit, but I lowered my edition sizes to 20. And the goal has always been to sell them out within a year. And that if I can do that, they don't all sell out in a year, but it comes close.
And so now, what is your typical edition size?
20 on my middle-sized pieces, like the ones I have in the show.
Yeah.
You know, 30-inch or so.
Uh-huh.
And then five on a big piece. And that seems to be a good number to keep things even. But there is no such thing as edition police. You know, it's all about your own personality and your own ethic, how you we were talking about honor the other day, how you honor your collectors. You know, you don't. If you get greedy, and greedy is you just managed to do a home run, and you only put 20 on the edition, and you decide, no, it should be 200. Well, you can't do that, can you?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting dilemma.
I do think collectors appreciate a smaller edition size if they've got the piece.
Okay.
Somebody must be holding back with an audience question. Yes.
What things specifically did you do to change the woman into a man?
He's not just a man, he's an older man. So that means his jaw is smaller, but I still lengthened his face and built his nose out, and now I'm bringing up his cheeks, and then he's also his temple area, is bigger. And I still got work to do on his face, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the gesture part right now, given that I've got less than a half hour to finish this thing. I finally get to use my crock pot. Yeah, sure. You know, because that's the thing. Yeah. There is a point where, you know, you go, wow, yeah, I know that guy. You know, it's a funny story because for a while, all my old men look just like my grandfather. And the antidote for that was to start using more models. We all automatically, this is a little bit different subject, but we all think the ideal face structure, it comes from our own family. You know, our mother or our daughter or whatever, you know. And from an artist's point of view, that sort of thing can really get in the way. One of my favorite model stories when I first was getting started, I had a dream. My daughters had reached puberty, and I was fascinated by the Apache's puberty rite. It's a 4-day ceremony, and they go through all kinds of trials, and they do a sculpture of that. And it starts off, the ceremony starts off with her facing the sun, and basically, as the sun comes up, she wears an abalone shell on her forehead, and that symbolizes, it's like the third eye kind of a thing. And it awakens the woman in her. She becomes a woman at that point. And I had this dream in my mind about what that looked like. And I woke up and started a sketch of it. And I thought I had a pretty good idea how it was going to be. And I went to Subway sandwich store to get lunch. And this little girl was there waiting on me. And I swear she was the girl in my dream. It just blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. And I wasn't my career wasn't old enough yet where I had gotten really used to asking people to model. And I was still young enough, too, to where now that I'm a granddad and a great-granddad and all that kind of stuff, it's easier to talk to young women because they already know, so it's okay. I'm not hitting on them or something, But I was still young enough to where I was worried about how she was going to feel. And I chickened out, and I left, and I got in my truck, and I was going back to my studio, and I started talking to myself. And I convinced myself that if I didn't get over it and go back and ask her to model for me, my career was going to be nothing. I was never going to make it. So I went back, and I ordered another sandwich. and I just waited and waited, and then finally, I said, okay. I said, look, I'm an artist, and I've had this idea, and I've got to say that you really are the essence of what I was thinking about, when I started this thing. And would you model for me? And I'm not kidding or exaggerating when she said, do you want mustard on your sandwich? That's what she said. She completely didn't even acknowledge what I told her. And it was so hard to say to begin with. And I went, okay, is your manager around? I want to talk to your manager. And so she brought him out. And then I was able to say, look, this is where I'm at. I said, what I'm thinking is, I want you to bring your mother, bring your boyfriend. It'll be fun. We can do it. We'll have do this model session and stuff. I said, so what do you think? She goes, okay. And so luckily I got her address because she didn't show up. I had to go get her. She was a beautiful Apache girl, just amazing to this day. I look at pictures of her and I go, wow, she was beautiful. She was beautiful in a very Indian way. I mean, she wasn't like, she was just perfect. And what she did is she made that piece a home run. It got so much better after that. What she brought to it was so much better than what I could have done without her. And it really taught me a lesson how important models are. Because you can do things out of your head, but when you find the right people that can model for you. I had another experience like that with a model at Scottsdale Art School. There was a gal that I had used before, and I wanted her to come up to my studio. And she said, my uncle models too. And I said, oh, yeah, good. Well, how old is he? Well, he's in his mid-80s. And I thought, oh, my God, you're kidding. You've got an uncle that's in his mid-80s who will come model for me? I was like, oh, my God, that's so exciting. And I said, so what do you think? Is he got any experience? And she says, well, it's been a while, but he used to model for Howard Turkning. And I went, oh, shit. I go, you mean I get to use one of Howard Turkning's guys? And sure enough, man, the guy was just,
Wow.
He was just gold. Just gold. And
I love it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But man, again, I learned my lesson about models, though. Yeah, it makes it'll when I wad it up, it'll kind of glue it. I did the fabric exactly the same way. Yeah, yeah. And the other part about this too is that it can be done in several different ways. I used to enjoy trying to explain to people in my workshops. They were all concerned and confused about armatures and stuff. And they say, well, what do we do? You know, how do we know that it's right? And I says, well, you know it's right if it doesn't fall down. And if it falls down, put a stick in it, you know, and then you can go from there. So basically what I'm doing right here is I'm putting in the foundation for basically what's going to be his war bonnet. I'm going to do all this before too long here.
This is really fascinating to watch this process. It's just crazy.
Yeah, see, one of the things about this kind of sculpture is that it doesn't care what's underneath, because when it's going to be cast, you're only making a mold of the outside, and I think that trips people up sometimes. You know, that I can have all that in the back, and it doesn't matter. It does matter if I'm going to, you know, when I'm going to cast it, but for a demonstration point of view, it means nothing. My clay is starting to get stiff. Yeah. That would be Pop-Tart's perfect. There it is, Pop-Tart. Yeah.
Yes. So the question is the last piece of material you put on. I think that's the tin foil that's been coated by the clay.
Yeah, this is just tin foil. It's just I already coated it. So I could have done it now, but this is just a little fudge. I spared you that part of the process.
I don't want to interrupt your thinking, John, but I'd like to ask you what advice you've got for, you know, young artists that are aspiring, you know, whether they be, you know, sculptors or painters, you know, the wisdom of your experience and your life is,
Yeah, that's a
quite
good,
valuable to.
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, yeah. Everybody comes at it from a different angle or a different motivation. If I didn't have a learning disability, I probably wouldn't have been an artist. I grew up in the neighborhood as somebody who couldn't read or write, but I could draw really good. And when I was tested to see if I belonged to the special class, one of the questions the lady giving me the test had for me is, draw me a picture of your family. And she went, this kid's pretty smart actually, So, but see, I was motivated because who am I? What am I about? What's my strength? That's one of the things that happened when I became an artist is I realized that if you play to your strengths and don't worry about your weaknesses have a tendency to sort themselves out. And that's so. Getting back to what your question was, something to be an artist is so personal, and there's so much to do. People that don't make it, I don't believe they have the passion. Passion meaning the need, the need to be so put in a showcase, where everybody can look into you and criticize you or say something wrong. A business friend of mine who became an artist friend of mine when I started my career had a lovely wife who loved to tell him like he was like a little boy, and a mommy would say, don't worry, sweetie, your work is just beautiful. You're just beautiful. Everything is just beautiful. My key to success, and Sue never did that to me. Sue always was my hardest critic, and she had it because we were together. And my attitude, my need to be successful, I thought of it is, do I want my ego to be successful, or do I want my art to be successful?
Wow.
Which one am I an advocate for? And I had to choose. And so it's like, okay, I'm just going to get, you're just going to get beat up, and that's how you survive this.
So if you want your ego to be successful,
you
post your art on Facebook, and all your friends hit like.
Yeah, exactly.
It does nothing for your art career.
Exactly. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything. Yeah, it doesn't do anything. So what I've done here so far is I've just built the foundation for what might be his bonnet. This front part here, that's the bill. That's where the beads are. Everybody kind of knows what a war bonnet sort of looks like, and a big part of that is the eagle down. That's that fluff that comes up here. I got my little skewers, of course, which I did this once, and it was a really good demonstration. But I was looking at the clock, and as soon as the clock ran out, his bonnet fell off. Right off. Everybody, yay! Oh, they still liked it, but it was like it was funny. So I need more skewers here. I don't want to fall off too quick. But I'm almost out of time, so I'm gonna wrap it up here in a minute. Or not in a minute, but in 10 minutes anyway.
Do you listen to music while you sculpt?
No, well, okay, I say no. Yeah, I do. If I'm really deep in thought, though, I can't.
Yeah.
It gets in my way. And I like really mellow stuff. I don't like, I'm a classical music fan. I like opera. I like that kind of stuff. Okay, what I've got going here on the side here is that's a buffalo robe. So I'm going to give him a little bit of, bring that up a little bit. His hair's falling down on the side of his face here. And I'll pull things up a little bit.
Don't you think somebody might buy that without any further work on it, like that?
Of course. You didn't say how much you'd pay, though, did you? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We could start a little auction right here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thing because
I don't know how I'd get it back to Wyoming.
yeah, and that's the other thing too. Is the reason why certain things have value is because you haven't populated the world with them, And so, my studies like this, like a study like this, could and I've had students that would benefit from something like this. Sure. Probably, but it's perishable. I don't like the idea of something floating around in the world that's just a chunk of clay that's going to be turned into something else later. So I've never offered them for sale. I'm sorry? What's the consistency of the it runs from drippy soup to a little bit thick on one side. Yeah, and the soupy part is just at the point where it doesn't quite burn my fingers. And of course how I'm operating now, really, I really would like to actually get done when I said I was going to get done, so everybody doesn't run away on me.
John?
Yes.
Follow up on one of the previous questions. Do you, or maybe what's an example of one of the most minimalistic pieces you've done where you've been in process like this and haven't taken it where you thought it would go or where someone expected it to go?
Yeah, I mean, I feel guilty that I really don't have something quite like that. And that's one of the downfalls to the business of being an artist, is that there's a level of expectation with your shows and stuff of what you're going to perform, how you're going to perform, and what they're going to be like. So, yeah, Ross and I were talking about that earlier. The piece that I have in my show, the Mother's Journey, the Sacagawea piece, I've really focused on that as being just movement and the mood, and I made sure that I didn't put any detail in it that didn't talk about the grace and the beauty of the flowing of it. And that one's probably, that would fit into that category though, because it's a little different from me. Eric, my guy that does all my patina work, said, you know, John, he said, that's really a great piece. It's not going to sell as well as your other work. And I said, yeah, I know, that's what you do, you know, it's because it's different. But that would be, that's a minimalist style piece though. And I have a tendency to follow people that are minimalist. And George Carlson, in a way, has been like that for me. You know, I've got his graceful dance in my dining room, and I love it. But you know, I've had people that come over to the house, and if they don't know what a shawl dance is, they don't understand what's going on in the piece. But see, that's the least of it. The thing is, it's beautiful. We were talking about shapes. A ring with some feathers can occupy that spot right there, like so.
I want to thank you for converting me. I learned here today how much easier it is to do sculpture than to do paintings. So I'm going to switch.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there you go.
On a serious note, how do you do a mold from things that are so fragile?
Yeah, first of all, you don't turn it over to somebody else. I mean, the cutting part. I cut everything up, and so I know I already know where the molds are going to be made from and such. And I've got one more minute. I'm going to do this. I'm going to finish the eagle down, and that's all it is. There's no. One of this always reminds me of why I'm doing this, and I'm not dealing with details here. I'm dealing with shapes, and it isn't like he needed that eagle down right there. What he needed is he needed a shape there. There was nothing to. There was no rhythm to it. Putting that down in there, and then this side is the same thing. His face is definitely less developed than I would hope. But I knew that once I started putting the rest of this together and gave him a little bit of attitude, he probably wouldn't even notice his face anymore. And I know I don't notice it. It was bothering me before, but I figured, no, it'll get better. It'll be all right. And that's the part that I learned from doing something like this, is that I'm forced to give up. I'm forced to say, nope, that's it. See, there it is, 3:30. I'm done. That was my deal.
It's amazing how a shawl or a headdress, especially, changes a sculpture.
Yeah. So that's Seth's favorite piece right there. It looks as good as the bronze, huh, Seth?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. You know, we've had the pleasure of seeing one of America's greatest artists right here with us today. It's a joy, an honor for me to be here with you, John. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Yeah, and right back at Tim. I didn't have Tim lined up, and he agreed to do this, and we go way back. And Tim is, you know, you guys probably all know Tim, and he knows the other side of the art world like nobody else, and it's just wonderful to have him as part of this thing. It really meant a lot to me. Thank you, Tim.
I bet you're ready to stretch. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, we can all go home now.
Thank you for participating in today's program. Tomorrow, our artist seminars continue at 10 a.m. with a presentation from the 2023 Prix de West Purchase Award winner, Walter T. Mattia. Our seminars are open to the public with museum admission, so we invite you to return tomorrow and invite guests who would enjoy this experience. Enjoy your afternoon.